So we've come to number 7 in our countdown of the top promos and interviews in WWE history. Number 9 in our top 9 was the Vince McMahon Life Sucks promo from SmackDown in 2000. Number 8 was the Mark Henry fake retirement on Raw in 2013. This one, I said this earlier, I watched this thing here that I'm reviewing this week so many times back when it happened. My VHS tape had so many tracking lines from all the rewinding that it was barely watchable. I probably still have it somewhere. Number 7 on this list took place on Monday Night Raw, 6 days before WrestleMania 13. It was March 17th, 1997, in Syracuse, New York, the city where, long before it was cool to beat up John Cena, some Marines decided to beat up Shawn Michaels. So if you really pay attention here, I think this is one of the greatest stories they've ever told. Maybe not as good as the Mega Power storyline in 88-89, but this is up there. And it's also one of the best slow burn heel turns in history. Randy Savage, I mentioned the Mega Powers. Randy Savage was another one in that storyline, even though I would argue that everything Savage said about Hogan was true. So you tell me who the real heel was there. But the seeds were already sown for Bret Hart to turn heel as far back as WrestleMania 12. The Iron Man match, if you remember, it went the full 60 minutes. Time expired. Bret thought he retained the title. He went to leave, but Gorilla Monsoon, who was the president at the time, he came out. He declared sudden death overtime. And Bret was furious, and he ended up losing his title. This was the first screw job. Fast forward to December of 96. He gets his first championship match. This was only a couple of months after Bret came back to the company. He gets his first championship match with Sid. He would end up having a whole bunch of them. And what happened? Shawn Michaels got involved and ended up costing Bret Hart the match. This was the second screw job. After the match, Bret snaps, he pulls Shawn's shirt over his head hockey style, he starts to beat the piss out of him. Then came the Royal Rumble match in 97. Bret wins, but the referees, they never see Austin get eliminated. So he climbs back inside, he dumps out Bret, he steals the win from him. That's the third screw job. He then wins the championship back, finally, at the next pay-per-view. But the very next night on Raw, this is now Bret's second championship match with Sid, by the way. Austin whacks Bret over the top of the head with a chair and costs him the title. His title reign lasted all of 1 day. So if you're counting along, that's now the fourth screw job. This man has now been screwed over in his mind 4 different times. Which leads us to this episode of Raw here before WrestleMania. Bret now has his third championship match with Sid in as many months. It is inside a steel cage. This time to keep everybody else out. I know, try not to laugh at that. Shawn already lost his smile, so he screwed up all of their WrestleMania plans. It's supposed to be Undertaker and Sid down for the title, Bret Hart against Steve Austin underneath in a submission match with Ken Shamrock as the referee. If Bret wins the title here, the match with Austin suddenly becomes a championship match, so the stakes are pretty high. Bret is already starting to get some boos at this point because, even though he's right, I mean, he's been screwed a whole bunch of times already. The fact is, he comes off as a whiny little bitch. And people did not want to hear a whiny little bitch. So, Austin gets involved here in this match to try to make sure Sid can't escape the cage. He's actually helping Bret because he's smart enough to know, unlike all the dumb baby faces and the dumb heels we see on TV these days, Austin is smart enough to know that if he helps Bret win, he's getting a title shot at WrestleMania. Well, the Undertaker don't like that. Undertaker comes out. He tries to stop Bret from escaping because he doesn't want to lose his title match. So it's mass chaos. Bret finally has the chance to walk out the door. Undertaker slams the cage door in his face, and that allows Sid to drop down, feet hit the floor. He retains his championship. That's the 5th screw job. Bret Hart has now been screwed 5 times. There was one more screw job later in the year. I think it happened in November. I can't really remember. Maybe one day WWE will tell me about it since I don't think they talk about it nearly enough. So now after 5 screw jobs in a year, Bret Hart finally snaps. Vince McMahon gets in the ring after the match to interview him. They're still taking the cage apart, which was actually a pretty cool visual. You have half the ring open, the other half is still closed in. Just know that this is the promo that gave birth to the 7-second delay on WWE television. Before this, those rare weeks when they actually aired live, it was live without a delay. After this, that all changed. It's hard to explain, I think, to newer fans how shocking this was at the time. At least for me it was. I mean, today we get like work shoots about as often as Michael Cole says, oh my, right? I mean, we get them all the time, and it's easy, I think, to get desensitized to it. The thing is, it felt real. The anger in Bret's voice, the anger etched on his face, it looked real. You could believe that this man had been wronged and that he really did snap. He lost his cool. It was shocking also because we had never seen Vince McMahon take a bump before. I mean, I know he did in I think it was 91. Piper hit him with a chair by accident that was meant for Ric Flair. But I mean, how many people watching the show that night actually remembered that? I didn't. Probably because I saw it one time as a kid. I didn't have the ability to go back and watch it on DVD or DVR or something. I saw it once and, when I was however old I was at the time, and I didn't remember it. Nobody remembered that. So for a lot of people, this is the first time they ever saw somebody put their hands on Vince McMahon. He got shoved down to the mat, shoved on his ass. That in and of itself was shocking. The one thing I would have had Bret do differently, if they really wanted to get it across like a total shoot, was to not mention Gorilla Monsoon. But it's a minor point. I mean, actually, one of the things I loved about this was how pissed off everybody was. Everybody was pissed off. Bret was pissed at the world. Austin's on the Titantron yelling at Bret. Sid's marching down to the ring telling everybody, I don't know shit. Undertaker comes back out to brawl with Sid. So now we have a 4-way brawl going on at ringside. Then out of the blue, for no reason at all other than he felt left out, Shawn Michaels, who lost his smile the month before and gave up the title because of a supposedly career-threatening knee injury, walks out on stage to watch everything. At one point, he walked down to the ring. He didn't know what to do with himself. Everyone's brawling around him. He walks down to the ring. He picks up one of the steel beams from the steel cage. Didn't know what to do with it, so he drops it. Then he goes and grabs a steel chair. He never used it. And then 6 days later, injury and all, he comes out to do commentary for the main event at WrestleMania and is apparently feeling well enough to start dancing in the ring. Well, thank God he recovered from that career-threatening knee injury. And as hot as this ending was, and it's still to this day, I think, one of the hottest endings to a Raw show, that pay-per-view, that WrestleMania, still did one of the worst, actually I think it did the worst buy rate in WrestleMania history. But it is easily one of the most memorable finishes to a Raw show of all time. And Bret followed that up with another pretty memorable promo the week after this, which is what really solidified his heel turn. It was after WrestleMania when he came out, he gave this long speech about American wrestling fans and telling them they could kiss his ass. And then I think the week after that is when he kind of unified with Davey Boy and Owen and they formed the Hart Foundation. I mean, 1997, despite how badly it ended for him, was really the best work of Bret Hart's career. I mean, at least on promos. And it's not even close. It really isn't. I mean, I preferred the matches he had back in like 93, 94. I was a huge Bret mark back then, but his mic work in 97 was just great. And the whole USA versus Canada storyline was tremendous, especially when they would go into Canada, and which they did a few times that year, and you would see all of the American babyfaces basically play the heel role. And here's this group of heels coming out getting just pops that were so loud the building shook. It was a lot of fun to watch. It was actually 97, looking back on it now. I don't know if I really felt it at that time, although I was totally into everything that was going on, on Raw and on Nitro. But looking back on it, 97 was a real turning point year for that company. And I think it's one of the best years of WWF television. I really do. I would still put 2000 probably at the top of that list, but 97's got to be right there behind it. There was a lot of pretty compelling stuff that was going on that year.